The autumn leaves crunched under Marcus Webb's worn sneakers as he made his way down Willow Street, his grocery bags cutting into his palms. At 63 years old, he'd learned to appreciate the small things. The cooling October air, the golden light filtering through the oak trees, the fact that he could still walk the 8 blocks from Savamart to his basement apartment without getting winded. Life hadn't turned out the way Marcus had planned. He'd been a high school history teacher for 35 years before budget cuts forced him into early retirement. His pension barely covered rent and groceries. His wife Linda had passed away 4 years ago, cancer taking her quick and cruel. His daughter Emily lived in Seattle with her own family, calling once a month out of obligation more than love. But Marcus had made peace with his solitude. He had his books, his crossword puzzles, his Tuesday evening chess games at the community center. It was a quiet life, but it was his. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the streetlights flickered on, Marcus noticed something unusual at the old Victorian house on the corner, the one that had been empty for months since Mrs. Patterson moved to a nursing home. The porch light was on. Not just on, it was flickering. On and off. On and off. In a pattern. 3 short blinks, 3 long, 3 short. Marcus stopped walking, his heart quickening. He'd been a Boy Scout leader for 20 years. He knew Morse code. SOS. Someone was signaling for help. Marcus set down his groceries and approached the house cautiously. The Victorian was a once grand dame now fallen on hard times. Peeling paint, sagging porch, windows dark except for that porch light continuing its desperate pattern. "Hello," Marcus called out, climbing the creaky steps. "Is anyone there? Do you need help?" Silence. Then, barely audible, a voice from somewhere inside. "Here, please. I'm here." The front door was unlocked. Marcus pushed it open, his phone already out with the flashlight on. "I'm coming in. I'm calling 911. "No." The voice was stronger now, urgent. "No police. Please. Not yet. I can explain." Marcus hesitated. Every instinct screamed this was wrong, dangerous, stupid. But that voice, it was young, scared, and desperately alone. He stepped inside. The house still smelled of Mrs. Patterson's lavender sachets mixed with dust and abandonment. Marcus swept his light across the foyer, up the grand staircase. "Where are you?" "Upstairs. Second door on the left." "Please hurry." Marcus climbed the stairs, his knees protesting each step. The second door on the left was slightly ajar. He pushed it open. In the beam of his flashlight, he saw him, a boy, maybe 17 or 18, sitting against the far wall. His face was gaunt, his clothes dirty, and his right leg was wrapped in what looked like torn sheets, dark with blood. "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed, rushing forward. "What happened? How long have you been here?" The boy flinched away, then seemed to force himself to stay still. 3 days. Maybe 4. I lost track. I had an accident. I fell through the floor in the kitchen. A nail went through my leg." Marcus knelt beside him, his old teacher instincts kicking in. "Assess. Don't panic. Help first. Ask questions later. We need to get you to a hospital. That wound could be infected." "I can't go to a hospital." The boy's eyes were fierce despite his weakness. "They'll ask questions. They'll find out who I am. They'll send me back." "Back where?" "To him. To my foster father. Gerald Marsh." The boy's voice cracked. "Please, mister. I ran away for a reason. If you call the cops, if you take me to the hospital, they'll contact social services. And Gerald, he has connections. He always gets kids back." And then, he couldn't continue. Marcus sat back on his heels, his mind racing. He'd heard the name Gerald Marsh. Everyone in town had. Big shot lawyer, pillar of the community, on every charity board, always in the newspaper for his generous fostering of troubled youth. "I'm Marcus Webb," he said quietly. "I'm a retired teacher. I live 8 blocks from here. And I need you to tell me everything, starting with your name." The boy studied him with eyes too old for his young face. I'm Caleb, Caleb Turner, and Gerald Marsh has been beating foster kids for years. I'm not the first one to run, but I'm going to be the first one who doesn't come back. Over the next hour, as Marcus carefully cleaned and rebandaged Caleb's wound with supplies he ran home to get, the story poured out. Caleb had been in the system since he was 12, after his single mother died of an overdose. 5 foster homes in 6 years. The first 3 had been okay, not great, but safe. Then he'd been placed with Gerald Marsh 2 years ago. He's smart, Caleb said, wincing as Marcus applied antiseptic. He never hits where it shows. Never leaves marks that social workers can see. And he's got this thing he does: if you report him, he makes sure you get moved to worse homes. Places where the foster parents are just in it for the checks. He has connections. He knows people. But the social workers, surely someone has investigated? They have. 3 times. But Gerald's too good. He coaches us before visits. Tells us what to say. And if we don't, Caleb's jaw tightened. The last kid who told the truth ended up in juvie on charges that mysteriously appeared. Assault, theft, all fake. But who's going to believe a foster kid with a record? Marcus felt old rage stirring in his chest. The same rage he'd felt watching students slip through cracks in systems that were supposed to protect them. How did you escape? I didn't escape. I left. There's a difference. Gerald was out of town last week, some lawyer conference. I packed a bag, took some food, and just walked. I remembered Mrs. Patterson's house was empty. I used to cut her lawn when I was in middle school before Gerald. I knew where she hid the spare key. And the injury? Second night here. I was looking for food in the kitchen. It was dark, and the floorboards were rotting. I fell through, landed on a bunch of old nails. Caleb gestured to his leg. I tried to clean it. I had a first aid kit, but it got worse. The fever started yesterday. I thought I was going to die here. Why didn't you signal for help sooner? Because I was scared. Because I didn't know if whoever came would help or just call the cops. But tonight, I looked out the window and saw you. You had this face. Kind, you know? Like maybe you'd understand. So I used the porch light. Figured if you were a scout leader type, you'd know Morse code. How did you know I was a scout leader type? Caleb almost smiled. Lucky guess. Marcus finished bandaging the leg, his hands steady despite his racing mind. The wound needed proper medical attention. Caleb needed food, fluids, probably antibiotics. And Marcus needed to make a decision that could change both their lives. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said finally. I'm taking you to my apartment. You're going to eat, drink water, and rest. Tomorrow morning, we're going to figure this out properly. You mean you're going to call the cops? No. I mean, we're going to build a case against Gerald Marsh that's so airtight he can't wriggle out of it. But that takes time. And you can't do it while you're half dead from infection. Why would you help me? Caleb asked, his voice breaking. You don't even know me. Marcus thought about Emily, about how he'd failed to protect her from her own demons, how she'd pulled away from him years ago. He thought about all the students he'd tried to help over 3 decades, the ones who'd slipped away despite his efforts. Because someone has to, Marcus said simply. And because I'm too old and too tired to walk past someone who needs help. Getting Caleb to Marcus's basement apartment was an adventure in itself. The boy could barely walk. Marcus ended up half carrying him, supporting his weight while Caleb hopped on his good leg. They moved slowly through the darkening streets, taking back alleys to avoid attention. Marcus's apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a retired teacher living on a pension. Small, cluttered with books, smelling faintly of coffee and old paper. But it was clean and warm and safe. Marcus settled Caleb on the couch, piled blankets on him, and made soup. Canned chicken noodle, nothing fancy, but Caleb ate like he was starving. Which Marcus realized he probably was. When did you last eat? Yesterday morning. I had a can of beans I found in Mrs. Patterson's pantry. Marcus made more soup. While Caleb ate, Marcus did what he did best. He made a plan. First, Caleb needed medical attention, but hospitals were mandatory reporters. However, Marcus had a friend, Dr. Robert Chin, who'd retired from family practice but still made house calls for old patients. Robert owed Marcus a favor from way back. Maybe he'd be willing to help. Second, they needed evidence. Caleb's testimony alone wouldn't be enough, not against a connected lawyer like Gerald Marsh. They needed other victims to come forward, needed documentation, needed to build something unshakable. Third, Caleb needed stability. He couldn't hide forever. Eventually, they'd have to face the system, but they'd do it on their terms with preparation. Caleb, Marcus said, sitting down with his own bowl of soup, tell me about the other foster kids at Gerald's house. The ones who ran or got moved. Do you know where they are? Caleb thought for a moment. There's Jake Morrison. He got sent to a group home in Millbrook after he reported Gerald. There's Ashley Chen, no relation to you, I think. She aged out of the system last year, working at the diner on 5th Street. And there's Tommy Williams. He's still with Gerald. He's 12. Marcus, Tommy's the reason I have to do this right. Gerald's getting worse. I couldn't protect Tommy anymore. That's really why I left. I thought if I could get help from the outside, maybe I could save him. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just about Caleb. It was about all of them. All the kids who'd slipped through the cracks. We'll save him, Marcus promised. But first, let me take a look at that leg again. The wound was worse than Marcus had initially thought. Red, swollen, hot to the touch. Definite infection. He called Dr. Chun, catching him just as he was heading to bed. Rob, I need a favor. A big one. Can you make a house call? Tonight. Marcus, I'm retired. And it's almost 9 o'clock. It's an emergency. A kid with a serious leg wound and probable infection. He can't go to the hospital for complicated reasons. There was a long pause. Dr. Chun had known Marcus for 40 years. He knew Marcus didn't ask for favors lightly. Give me an hour, Dr. Chun said finally. True to his word, Dr. Chun arrived with his medical bag and a knowing look. He examined Caleb thoroughly, asked minimal questions, and finally sat back with a sigh. You're lucky. It's infected but not septic yet. Another day or two without treatment and you would have been in serious trouble. He looked at Marcus. He needs antibiotics, rest, proper wound care, and probably a tetanus shot. Can you provide those things without reporting? Dr. Chun removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Marcus, you're asking me to violate mandatory reporting laws. I'm asking you to give us time to do this right, to build a case that will actually protect this kid and others like him. How much time? A week, maybe 2. Dr. Chun looked at Caleb, really looked at him, saw the fear, the exhaustion, the desperate hope. I'll give you 10 days. But if that wound isn't improving significantly by then, he goes to the hospital. No arguments. Deal. Dr. Chun administered the tetanus shot, left antibiotics and detailed care instructions, and departed with one final piece of advice. Whatever you're planning, Marcus, be careful. Going after someone like Gerald Marsh, it's dangerous. So is walking past a kid in trouble, Marcus replied. Over the next week, Marcus's apartment became a war room. Caleb recovered slowly, the infection responding to antibiotics, his strength returning. And together they built their case. Marcus reached out to Ashley Chun at the diner. She was 19, tough and wary, but when she heard what they were trying to do, she broke down crying. I thought no one would ever believe us, she said. Sitting in Marcus's tiny kitchen with coffee neither of them was drinking. Gerald Marsh is untouchable. That's what everyone says. No one is untouchable, Marcus said firmly. Tell me what happened to you. Ashley's story was horrifying. Years of physical abuse, emotional manipulation, threats if she spoke out. She'd reported him once. The social worker had investigated, found nothing, and Ashley had been moved to a group home where conditions were so bad she'd aged out living on the street for 6 months before getting the diner job. "I'll testify," she said finally. "If it means Tommy and kids like him are safe, I'll tell everything." Jake Morrison was harder to track down. The group home in Millbrook had closed. It took Marcus 3 days of phone calls, calling in favors from old teaching colleagues, before he found Jake working construction in the next county. Jake was 20 now, barely out of the system himself. He'd built walls around his trauma, didn't want to revisit it. "Why should I trust you?" Jake asked when Marcus finally reached him by phone. "Every adult I ever trusted either hurt me or let me down." "Because I'm not asking you to trust me," Marcus said. "I'm asking you to trust yourself. You know what Gerald Marsh did. You know he's still doing it. Caleb's here with me right now. Tommy Williams is still in that house. You have a chance to stop it." There was a long silence. Then, "If I do this, if I testify, you have to promise me something." "What?" "That it won't be for nothing. That he actually goes down this time. I promise I will do everything in my power to make that happen. Then I'm in." By day 9, they had 3 witnesses, Caleb, Ashley, and Jake. They had documented timelines of abuse spanning 5 years. They had medical records that, when viewed together, painted a damning picture of repeated injuries inconsistently explained. But they needed more. They needed proof that Gerald had used his connections to cover it up. They needed the smoking gun. That's when Caleb remembered the files. "Gerald keeps files," he said suddenly one evening. "In his home office. On all of us. I saw them once when I was cleaning. Medical records, school records, but also other stuff. Notes. I think he documents everything, probably to protect himself legally. If we could get those files." "Breaking and entering," Marcus said. "That's a crime. So is what he's doing to kids." Marcus looked at this young man. No longer a scared boy, but someone with steel in his spine, willing to fight back. "You're right. But we don't break in. We get invited." Marcus's plan was simple but risky. He would approach Gerald Marsh openly, presenting himself as a concerned community member who'd heard about Gerald's wonderful work with foster children and wanted to potentially volunteer or donate. "He'll never buy it," Caleb said. "He will if I stroke his ego enough. Men like Gerald Marsh love being admired, and he has no idea we're connected." The next day, Marcus put on his one good suit, the one he'd worn to Linda's funeral, and made an appointment to meet Gerald Marsh at his home office. Gerald Marsh was exactly what Marcus expected. 50s, silver hair, expensive suit, practiced smile. His home was immaculate, decorated with photos of smiling foster children who probably weren't smiling inside. "Mr. Webb, wonderful to meet you," Gerald said, shaking Marcus's hand with politician-perfect firmness. "I understand you're interested in our foster care program?" "I am," Marcus said, channeling every ounce of acting ability he developed in 35 years of teaching. "I lost my wife 4 years ago. I find myself with time and resources, and I thought perhaps I could make a difference in young lives." They talked for an hour. Gerald gave his rehearsed speech about the importance of providing stable homes for troubled youth. Marcus pretended to be impressed. And all the while, Marcus's eyes cataloged everything: the locked file cabinet, the computer, the security system panel by the door. "Could I see where the children stay?" Marcus asked. "I'd love to get a sense of the environment you've created." Gerald hesitated for just a fraction of a second, so brief Marcus almost missed it. Then the practiced smile returned. "Of course. Right this way." The bedrooms were perfect. Too perfect. Like stage sets designed to impress inspectors. Marcus saw a young boy in one room. Tommy, he realized with a jolt. The boy looked up, saw Gerald, and something flashed across his face before he masked it with a smile. "Fear. Tommy's one of my success stories," Gerald said. ruffling the boy's hair in a gesture that made Tommy flinch almost imperceptibly. Came to me angry and violent. Now look at him. Model student. Marcus wanted to grab Tommy and run. Instead, he smiled and nodded and played his part. Back in the home office, as Gerald prepared some informational packets, Marcus made his move. He'd practiced it 100 times in his apartment. A stumble, a grab at the desk for support, a sweep of his hand that knocked Gerald's coffee cup over. Not onto the papers, but onto the floor, creating the maximum distraction. "Oh God, I'm so sorry," Marcus exclaimed, dropping to his knees to clean up the spill. Gerald rushed to get paper towels. And in those precious seconds, Marcus's hand darted into the unlocked desk drawer. Gerald had opened it earlier to get business cards, and grabbed what looked like an appointment book or ledger. He shoved it into his jacket pocket just as Gerald returned. "I'm terribly sorry," Marcus said again. "Clumsy of me." "No harm done," Gerald said, though his eyes had gone slightly cold. "Let me get you those packets." 5 minutes later, Marcus left with a handshake, a folder of information, and a stolen ledger burning a hole in his pocket. Back at the apartment, Caleb, Ashley, and Jake, who'd driven down to help, gathered around as Marcus opened the ledger. It was better than they'd hoped. Gerald Marsh kept meticulous records. Not of abuse, he wasn't that stupid, but of payments. Money given to social workers, judges, other foster parents. Money to cover up complaints. Money to transfer kids. Money to make problems disappear. "This is it," Ashley breathed. "This is proof of corruption. We need to take this to someone who can't be bought," Marcus said. "Someone outside the local system." Through his network of retired teachers and community connections, Marcus got a name. Teresa Alvarez, an investigator for the State Attorney General's office who specialized in foster care corruption. Marcus called her the next morning. "Ms. Alvarez, my name is Marcus Webb. I have evidence of systematic abuse and corruption in the local foster care system, and I have witnesses willing to testify." "Mr. Webb, I get calls like this every week. Most of them lead nowhere. I have a ledger showing payoffs to officials. I have 3 victims spanning 5 years willing to go on record, and I have a 12-year-old boy still in danger. Please, just look at what we have." There must have been something in his voice, desperation, conviction, truth. "Fax me everything you've got. I'll review it and call you back by tomorrow." They faxed everything. Then they waited. The call came at 8 the next morning. "Mr. Webb, I'm driving down today. Where can we meet?" The investigation moved faster than Marcus had imagined possible. Teresa Alvarez was like a force of nature, determined, thorough, incorruptible. She interviewed all 3 witnesses, reviewed every document, and coordinated with federal authorities to ensure the local system couldn't interfere. 2 weeks after Marcus had found Caleb in the Victorian house, police raided Gerald Marsh's home. They removed Tommy Williams and 2 other foster children. They seized computers, files, and financial records. Gerald Marsh was arrested on multiple charges: child abuse, fraud, corruption, bribery. The story exploded across state news. The connected lawyer, the pillar of the community, exposed as a predator who'd been hurting children for years while paying off the people supposed to protect them. But the real story, the one that mattered, was smaller and more personal. Caleb stood in Marcus's apartment watching the news, tears streaming down his face. "We did it. We actually did it." "You did it," Marcus corrected. "You were brave enough to run, brave enough to signal for help, brave enough to fight back. You gave me a reason to fight. You made me believe someone gave a damn." The legal aftermath took months. Gerald Marsh went to trial, was convicted, and received a 15-year sentence. Several social workers and 1 judge lost their jobs. The system was forced to reform to create new oversight procedures. Ashley, Jake, and Caleb all testified, public, painful, but ultimately cathartic. Tommy and the other children were placed in safe homes, real homes, with families who'd undergone enhanced screening. And Caleb? Caleb had nowhere to go. He was 18 now, aged out of the system but without family, without resources, without a place to land. Marcus was sitting in his apartment one evening, reading, when Caleb brought it up. "I need to figure out what I'm doing," Caleb said. "Where I'm going. I can't camp on your couch forever." Marcus looked around his small apartment, at the second toothbrush in the bathroom, the extra groceries he'd started buying, the way Caleb's books had started mixing with his on the shelves. "Why not?" Marcus asked. "What? Why can't you stay? I have the space. You're working part-time at the bookstore downstairs. You're enrolled in community college classes starting next semester. You could stay if you wanted." Caleb stared at him. "Marcus, I'm 18. You don't have to take care of me anymore." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Unless you'd rather be somewhere else." "I wouldn't," Caleb said quietly. "I'd like to stay, if you're sure." "I've never been more sure of anything." That night, Marcus called Emily. They'd been talking more lately. The whole experience with Caleb had somehow bridged the distance between them. "Dad," Emily said when he told her about Caleb staying permanently, "are you sure about this? You're 63 years old. You deserve to enjoy your retirement, not raise another kid." "Emily, I'm not raising him. I'm just being here. The same way I wish I'd known how to be there for you better when you were growing up." There was a long pause. Then softly, "You did your best, Dad. I know that now, and I'm proud of you. For Caleb, for all those kids, for not walking past." 2 years later, Marcus stood in the community college auditorium watching Caleb accept his associate degree in social work. Caleb wanted to reform the foster care system from the inside, wanted to make sure no other kids fell through the cracks he'd almost disappeared into. Emily was there too, visiting from Seattle with her husband and Marcus's granddaughter. A surprise visit that Marcus treasured. After the ceremony, they all went out for dinner. Caleb sat across from Marcus, smiling, healthy, alive with purpose and possibility. "Thank you," Caleb said suddenly, interrupting the conversation, "for that night, for stopping, for giving a damn when you didn't have to." Marcus thought about that night, the groceries he'd set down, the SOS signal, the decision to step into that dark house. He thought about how his life had been empty, just routine and loneliness dressed up as contentment. "You saved my life," Marcus said. "Every bit as much as I saved yours." "How do you figure?" "Because I was going through the motions, Caleb. Just existing, not living. You gave me a purpose again. You reminded me that I still had something to offer the world. So thank you." Emily reached across the table and squeezed her father's hand. Caleb smiled. Marcus's granddaughter babbled happily in her high chair. And Marcus Webb, 65 years old, retired teacher, once convinced his best days were behind him, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Complete. Marcus still lives in his basement apartment, though Caleb helps with rent now. They have dinner together most nights, talk about their days, argue about politics and philosophy and whether pineapple belongs on pizza. Caleb is finishing his bachelor's degree in social work. He's dating a girl from his criminology class. He's healing, slowly but surely, learning that not all adults abandon you, that some promises are kept, that safety can be real and permanent. Gerald Marsh serves his sentence. The system he corrupted has reformed, though not enough, never enough. But it's better. 12 children are safer because Marcus stopped that night. Hundreds more will be safer because of the reforms his case prompted. Ashley manages the diner now. Jake got his contractor's license and employs other former foster kids, giving them the stability he never had. Tommy, little Tommy Williams, is in high school, doing well, living with a family that actually loves him. They all get together once a month for dinner at Marcus's apartment. They call themselves the Willow Street Warriors. A joke that's also not a joke. They share their victories and struggles, their progress and setbacks. They hold each other accountable. They refuse to let each other slip back into darkness. Because that's what happens when someone stops. When someone sees the SOS and doesn't walk past. When someone decides that another person's pain matters more than their own convenience. The light keeps shining. Marcus Webb was just a lonely old man walking home with groceries on an autumn evening. He saw a light flickering in an abandoned house. A desperate signal he could have ignored. Instead, he stopped. He listened. He stepped into the darkness because someone needed help. In doing so, he didn't just save Caleb. He saved himself. He saved his relationship with his daughter. He saved all the children who would have suffered if Gerald Marsh had continued unchecked. One decision. One act of courage. One refusal to walk past. That's all it takes to change the world. Not grand gestures or perfect plans. Just the willingness to see someone's pain and decide it matters. To recognize the SOS signals people send. Sometimes in Morse code, sometimes in bruises, sometimes in silence. And respond with compassion instead of convenience. Every day, someone is sending out a signal. A cry for help. A desperate flicker in the darkness. Will you see it? Will you stop? Or will you walk past? Telling yourself it's not your problem. You're not equipped. Someone else will handle it? Marcus Webb chose to stop. His life and Caleb's and Tommy's and all the others is better because of that choice. You have that same choice. Every single day. What will you do when you see the last light on Willow Street?